Oh, there we go.
Hello, everyone. We are live, and it actually picked up all three streaming sources today. Yay.
Very
Huzzah.
Okay.
on
We got
time
that?
zero.
Hello to the one person watching. All right, let's just hold on a second. Joe, say something.
I'm amazing.
Greg, say something.
I'm saying something.
And I'm going to hit this to make sure it works. It works. Did you guys hear it?
We did. Or I did.
Definitely.
I'm sorry, but the way I have to do it, and I've tried it, is actually no, I don't have it that way. Do I? So you guys heard that.
Yes.
Yep.
So let me try turning it down a little bit more. And let me hit it again. All right, maybe I'll turn it down in two spots and maybe it won't be so loud. See, people, this is what we get when we start the show and we're not quite ready, is you get to hear us tinker with our toys.
Or lack thereof.
Hey, we still have toys.
Toys are fun.
I guess it's true. I did just fly an A300 in my flight sim.
I was going to say, I want to get that as my toy.
What,
The
new
A300?
flight sim?
The flight simulator.
Don't. I've heard from everybody who was an X-Plane person who thought, this is going to be my new sim, I'm dropping X-Plane. They all say it's a toy. It's like
Really?
you play it on your Xbox. Yeah. Like, maybe in a year it'll get good, or when they start having the good add-ons like PMDG, but they're saying right now, if you... other than looking at scenery, it's crappy. It's great at scenery and visuals. Everything else sucks.
Yeah, I haven't looked at the minimum requirements for it yet.
I would like to get. I just remember the old flight simulator back in the old days, and I used to like that.
Yeah, I mean, I love Flight Sim. I've always loved Flight Sim. And this Flight Sim was going to be an excuse to buy a new flight, you buy a new computer or build a new computer. But man, if it's saying if it's basically built for the Xbox, then that.
Yeah, there's always X-Plane, which is what I use.
Yes, there is always X-Plane, and Glenn says X-Plane is great. So, see, look, Glenn says X-Plane is great.
I've been
Glenn
flying an X-Plane for 20 years almost. Ever since I was a kid.
You still are a
Liz and
kid.
Glenn.
Thanks.
All right, I'm going to mash the record button. Ready, Greg? I'm going to
Ready.
hit the record
Oh,
button.
shoot. Oh, so I gotta pull up my notes. I'm ready. See, you would have made me screw that up already. It's only what 3 minutes in, and I've already. Never mind. Just go.
The only problem is I wasn't recording to catch that and share it at the end. Why am I so quiet? All right, Greg, say something.
Something. I'm saying something.
All right, Joe, say something.
Yo, so genial.
Holy cow, you're so much louder than everyone else. Let me bump this up a little bit. Nope. There we go. How about that? Is that whatever?
You sound fine to us. Or to me.
Well, I know it's just in the recording, in the recording software. You know, the thing that I actually get to monkey around with and all the post editing stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll figure it out. There we go. I just need to talk into the microphone, I guess. Amazing how that works. All right. Hit it, Greg.
The Flying in Life podcast is produced to promote aviation and the dispatch career. The hosts of the show do not represent their employers, and the show is used for awareness and entertainment only. All facts on the show can be found in the public domain, and there is no inside information being used to produce this show. Please do not get us fired. Thank you.
Flying Life Podcast, episode 64, recorded August 24th, 2020. Welcome to the Flying Life podcast just about that, flying, aviation, and our lives. I'm Dispatcher Mike, a dispatcher for a major airline based here in the United States. Joining me again in this episode is Dispatcher Gregg, another dispatcher for a major airline based here in the United States, and Dispatcher Joe, another dispatcher for a major airline, but he's not in the United States. He's north of the border in Canada. Hello, Joe and Gregg. How are we doing today?
Great, thanks.
Still employed.
That's a start, brother. As long as we're still employed is always a good thing.
This is going to be a big week for at least me and my company. So if furloughs are effective October 1st, they need to give us 30 days notice. So we'll find out this week as far as whether I still have a job come October 1st. Or there's always the chance of the CARES Act at some point passing too. So
you are not the only one. There are some other people on Twitter and all that I follow that are also on the bubble with their respective airlines, and they've also said the same thing. Sometime this week, they're going to find out if they're going to have a job after October 1st or not. So this is what we've been talking about the last 3 months, waiting for the other shoe to fall, and it's time for the shoe to fall.
I'm waiting for our friends up in Congress to maybe get a powwow together and actually have a civil conversation and try to vote in some sort of aid for the CARES Act extension. And if you're listening and you're from Congress, do your job. Please extend the CARES Act so I can have a job till March 31st.
Yeah.
Here's my lobbying.
Our union at Acme with the dispatchers, we're not going to wait for the people in Washington, D.C. to do your job, and we've ratified an agreement with the company to give our dispatchers furlough protection till January 1st of 2022. And so we didn't take it too much on the chin with it. It worked out, but it's the right thing to do. But hey, people are going to have a job at least through the end of next year.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Yeah, I would just like for, coronavirus to get under control in the U.S. so we could start flying again. Then I might be able to go back to work.
So would we, Joe. So would we. But some of us
Yep.
stay home. Some of us go out wearing a mask, and some of us don't do that. Others go to the beach.
Yep.
Or fly airplanes without wearing a mask and wind up having to divert airplanes because of security issues and all sorts of stuff that happens on an airplane.
Yeah, I love how we've done like a 180 on, you can't wear a mask, you can't obscure your face for security reasons, and now you have to wear a mask for security reasons.
Yeah, the first time I walked into a bank, it was a bit strange, like covering up my face to go into the bank, and I'm like, if I did this like 3 months ago, I would have been arrested and told to leave.
Yeah. Plus, you get to feel like a bandit without committing any crimes.
Yes, absolutely, especially here in Georgia. All right, so in this episode, we are going to first find the show notes hidden somewhere on my screen. In this episode, we're going to talk about a FedEx Boeing 767 that had a gear incident in Los Angeles. May numbers turned out that they had the lowest number of flights in recent U.S. history. I'm not going to say U.S. history because in early 1900s there weren't many flights happening. Qantas CEO says a vaccine may be necessary to resume flights to the United States. Cargolux comes out with a special mask delivery on a Boeing 747, which it actually looks really cool. A Delta pilot couple retires on the same flight. And ExpressJet, as we talked about on the last episode, is to wind down operations on the 30th of September. And then the topic this week, we're going to be talking about ETOPS, extended twin operations, or now it's just extended operations, or as I'd like to call it, engines turn or people swim, and all of that fun stuff that goes into that.
Or people scream.
People scream too. I'd like to thank Joe for this heavy topic that we're going to be talking about today, and we'll be leaning on his knowledge of ETOPS throughout the entire show.
Just don't expect me to quote U.S. regs.
Oh, come on. What's the point of that if you're not going to quote the U.S. regs that I put in the show notes for you to quote?
Huh. Well, I can quote them, but don't expect me to literally quote them.
Don't expect Gregg or I to literally quote them either.
Well, then we'll leave it to people to do their own research. Okay, so 767, the FedEx 767. If you guys have not seen that video, it's really cool. It seems like they were coming in from Newark to LAX in the middle of the night. Did a couple of low approaches over the airport to check the status of the gear. Looked like their left gear didn't extend, and they did a gear up landing on the left gear, and pretty cool video of that. So I thought it'd be cool to talk about that, like from a dispatch point of view, because that's something that they would have been reaching back to their company, to their standards pilots, their technical pilots, maintenance, and their dispatcher to go through all that. So what would your perspectives be if you were the dispatcher in that hot seat that day? What do you think would be going through your head?
Thing is, how much fuel does FedEx put on their airplanes? Because I know if it was one of our guys going in there, they may have had time to hold for a few minutes, do one go around, and that's it. I mean, these guys held for I don't know how long, a while, and then did how many low approach so that the tower could see if they had visual on the wings. The gear.
Yeah. And if you listen to ATC, when they're doing their final approach, they say they have an hour of fuel left when they're going in for the actual landing. So I wonder if they tankered. I wonder if that's a tanker leg for them.
It could be. I mean, they were coming out of
Newark. Yeah.
Newark, so they probably wouldn't. Well, I'm just making an assumption. Newark is very expensive for gas. I don't know if it's cheaper necessarily than in LA, but
yeah. One of the other things I know those cargo guys sometimes do is they'll put on extra fuel so that if certain flights bulk out, that they can drop into stations and pick up cargo and keep going. So maybe it was one of those types of flights. It'd be really cool to get one of those FedEx or UPS guys on here and quiz them about this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, that was my first inkling when I watched the video. I'm like, good thing they had all that fuel to go around. But
they had an hour and 40 minutes, as it said in the video, to start. So they said that they had an hour 40 on board. So when you really think about it, plus the 45-minute reserve, they're just carrying 50 minutes of fuel. We don't know what the weather was en route. At least I don't look to see what the weather was en route. We don't know what the forecast was in LA. I think it was okay, but
we're just getting out of New York.
Yeah, exactly. Escape routes of New York. I mean, yes, we're in a pandemic, but man, New York is still a pain in the butt to get out of on occasion.
So fuel all the way, buddy. That's all it is.
Glad I don't take a hand off from you.
But if I were the dispatcher in this situation, I'd be crapping in my pants. I mean, it's you're dealing with a situation that you really can't do much about from your perspective. I mean, other than getting maintenance involved. But I'd be very closely monitoring the fuel situation, and wow, just I don't know, what are you going to do at that point? It's in there.
Yeah, so like at Acme Canada, whenever we have something like this, we actually have checklists we go through depending on what category of incident it is. So if it was me, I'd like to think I would be just following the checklist and doing what it says and paging in the right people. And if I was chiefing, I'd be doing the same thing. If that was me. That's what I'd like to think, because really, like you said, there's not much you can do other than be the communications quarterback, like the secretary patching phones and stuff through and answering radios. Because that's, there's not much. It's not like it's a weather diversion and you can find a solution. Like, there's no solution to this. So
it's the longest runway you're going to find probably around. I mean, so
isn't that the longest runway on the U.S. West Coast?
Well,
it might be. I don't know how long Seattle is, but yeah, I would think so. San Francisco, I don't think is that long. I mean, because that's 12,500 feet, I believe, is the length of the longest runway in LAX. So,
other than Edwards,
yeah, you don't get much better than that. Oh yeah, no, see, that's a good point. Edwards does have a 32,000 foot long runway, so I mean, but you're not going to land a passenger jet on the lake bed.
Hopefully.
And how far is Edwards from LA? Is it
10 minutes?
Right there.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You just go over Burbank, over the range, and you're looking right at it.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't good. I mean, and everything was for the crew that they did that we could hear from the aviation video and the YouTube video, and that everything the crew did was fine and the correct thing to do. They had their, if I was flying it, it's probably pretty much what I would do as well. From the dispatch perspective, I'll go get a patch to maintenance and control, listen in, coordinate with ground, the operations on the ground, and let them know what's going to happen. Probably have a fellow dispatcher call them, let them know that there's a problem with that flight coming in. Maybe some local coordination with the airport itself to try to get that south complex open, which it seems they did. Either that was LA Ops on their own, that finishing the work early and opening up the south complex, or not, or some coordination with FedEx to make it happen. You got to think that that time of the night. So it was 3:30 in the morning there. That's still 5:30 a.m. In Memphis, where the FedEx Global Operations Center is. So they probably still had a full staff of people on, uh, ending their pushes. Their big bank of flying is coming to an end at that time of the night anyway. So all the stuff on the East Coast was pretty much down, I would assume, already by that time. So now you're just landing the airplanes on the West Coast, so that you still have a pretty large contingent of people there. So
Yeah, I
um,
mean, and like I learned an interesting thing about the 6-7 freighter is that they don't have slides. So like there was one injury from one of the pilots. I think they broke their ankle, or they broke their heel going down the ropes because they only have ropes. I didn't know that, and I think for us, because we're all at passenger airlines, we would be thinking also about getting the folks off the airplane once it stops on the runway, getting buses and stuff. But the FedEx guys wouldn't have really had to worry about that because they just got boxes. So
the boxes are going to miss their delivery time,
yeah,
possibly. But I mean, but like you said, they don't have slides on the 767, which I also learned today listening to the Airline Pilot Guy show, talking about this afternoon when I was listening to it. But they have inertia reels off of the door, one left door, and then they also have ropes, and they chose to go down to the ropes for some reason, and it's still a pretty long way to slide down a rope. Um, I'm not going to judge anything, but not all airline pilots are the most physically fit people to go down a rope, and it's a shame that he and or she broke their foot or their ankle on the way down.
yeah, and of course the interesting thing is even if they had slides, they might not have been usable because the nose was so far up in the air because of the collapsed main landing gear. So the slide might not have even been usable anyway.
Yeah, but a slide should be able to work in all configurations of the aircraft. Um, be able to reach. I mean, with gear, without gear, partially collapsed gear. I think they're supposed to
I think
be
they're
able to be
certified.
operated and they're certified for that stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm not. I'd have to double check because I know, like on a passenger airline, they may just leave the one LNR open and then or closed and go down the back because that's closer to the ground. But I'm not sure.
Yeah, interesting there. So
But that video is pretty cool. If you guys want to check it out, on the link. Yeah.
yeah, there'll be a link in the show notes to the Vast Aviation, their group about they have the radar scope and pretty much all the conversation from live ATC and all of that as well. So, should be pretty good there. It didn't muck up the LAX traffic for the passenger jets too much, at least not on Acme's end, because we're usually all off on the north complex anyway for where our gates are. So, all in all, it's pretty good.
I was working that morning, and I had actually a couple of arrivals going into LA. They were probably about an hour out, and then ATC gets on the Telcon ground stop LA, where where the complex is shut down. I'm thinking, oh great, my guy's gonna get in. Luckily, there were no issues. I think they had a couple delay vectors. I mean, the demand at the time was very low, so but you just
Yeah,
never know.
Yeah.
turned out to be good. Greg, you want to take the next one?
Sure, if I can find my notes here.
Always
May,
prepared.
I am. Good dispatcher I am. Okay, May turned out to have the lowest number of flights in U.S. history. The end. No, actually, yeah. Looking at the article here, how many passengers traveled in May? Let's see. The lowest, 192,412 flights. It's down 330,000 flights from the previous year. So yeah, I mean, it's not a surprise to anyone. I mean, I can't, April is bad, May is bad. And I'm looking at the TSA numbers during that time, the checkpoint numbers, and the highest number of passengers they had go through on any given day was 318,000 passengers. So that's obviously nothing compared to 2.5 million in the previous year.
Yeah, I think this
So
article is also good because it not only talks about numbers, but also goes into percentage of flights canceled. Apparently, Spirit Airlines didn't cancel a single flight in May. So either their revenue department's really good and they really
yeah,
just chopped all their flying, or they did nothing and flew everything anyway. Allegiant canceled half of their flights, so oops. And then, but it also talks about refunds are the number one cause of complaints, and then it ranks the airlines by the number of complaints by there, and it went through, and numero uno is three times number two in the complaints on refunds compartment, and then also some other international airlines saw some big DOT complaints as well. Um, Pretty interesting, really. This is a really interesting article here. As we know, May sucked, and so did June, and well, July, and August ain't turning out to be that great either. I like David's whoever highlighted that in the video. Why did May turn out to be the lowest flights? Is there something going on? Yeah, I mean it's just one of those things. It's like it's kind of like one of those. Okay, here's the numbers to quantify what we really felt in May, and I'm sure June's numbers are going to be the same. And like you said, August ain't that great either.
Yeah.
so in refunds, you had United as the largest, American, Delta, and then Southwest is number 6. Interesting. Complaints
Yeah,
about refunds, how long it's taken. That's no surprise with the volume, right? I mean, how many people are asking for refunds every day?
yeah. I know at one point Acme was saying that we had a heck of a lot more going out the doors than we had coming in the doors.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think it was taking a week to couple of weeks to actually go and process those refunds because there were a couple of times where the whole reservation system and the refund system was just maxed out. It didn't know it couldn't really operate at that level. And I
So
say that's why you should have used trip insurance. So the airline gets to keep their money and your trip insurance pays for it.
Yeah, we know the banks have nothing good to pay for.
No, no.
I'm trying to
Alrighty.
pull up July's report here just to get something a little bit more current. And
Is July's report out yet?
yeah, the air travel consumer,
The DOT report isn't, because this
or maybe
May's
this
report just got
is
reported, a couple of days
okay.
ago.
So this was published in July for May. I'm sorry, I stand corrected. This is May's report.
Yeah.
Disregard.
Disregarding, as usual. All right, Qantas
Just edit
CEOs.
that out in post.
What was that?
Edit that out in post.
No, I'm definitely not going to edit that on post. Qantas CEO says a vaccine may be necessary to resume flights to the United States. Alan Joyce is pretty sure he's the CEO down there of Qantas. Basically, it really sucks for Qantas. as we said before. But according to Alan Joyce, Qantas will not be resuming trans-Pacific flying anytime soon, and does not expect Qantas to begin flying international sectors again until the middle of next year. Two governments down in the southern hemisphere, that the one of New Zealand and one of Australia, really took some really hard lockdown stance of everything, and it was absolutely crazy. And our friend from New Zealand, Glenda's down there. They went over 100 days without any new COVID-19 cases or person-to-person case transfers go through, and all of that. So it doesn't surprise me. It just really, really sucks for those airlines that they go through and do that. And Glenn, I'll have words with you later about that comment. Alan Joyce says the United States, with its level of prevalence there, is probably going to take some time. It's going to need probably a vaccine before we see that happening. But the news of vaccines seems to get better every day, and that could mean the United States is seen in the market by the end of 2021. Let's hope so. That would be nice. But hopefully, it is what it is. And like I said, it just sucks. This news is depressing. Who put this together?
Hey, I put together the next one too, which is very not depressing.
No, but still the airplane's wearing a mask. I mean, come on. How does the air get into the pitot tubes with that mask over its nose?
The air gets in, but the virus doesn't.
So this is Cargo Lux reveals a special mask livery on the Boeing on a Boeing 747-400. Cargo Lux today has revealed a 747 with a new coating. The special livery has a mask on its nose of the aircraft where the cargo loading door is, and straps that leading back to the airline's seat, which I think was very, very cute and very very apropos to actually put the straps right over the seat of the airline.
It's very clever. It's a beautiful livery. I hope we get it in X-Plane for our just released 748 freighter.
If you have a paid Flight Radar 24 subscription, go ahead and set your local major airport up for the registration of LX-VCF. That's Lima X-Ray Victor Charlie Fox, and you'll get a little ding, a notification anytime. Like I have the KLM orange and blue 747 set up as an alert for Atlanta, just because I think it's a beautifully done aircraft and it really feels well. And I had that set up because I actually wanted to see the aircraft in person, not just see the airplane in photos, but actually see it because, well, I'm that kind of special loser. But I think I'm going to set one up because I believe Cargo Lux does come into Atlanta every once in a while. And I think I'd go out to see this aircraft to try to see this airplane in person as well.
Yeah, I'd do the same. They are fairly regular up at Acme Canada headquarters home airport. So them and Korean, actually.
I'm just going to read here. It says 747-8. It's about 8 years old, delivered back in 2012. The company has not released the schedule of routes the plane will be flying, but it has been to Taipei since July, thanks to our friends over at Flight Radar 24. Beautiful looking bird. I mean, it's what can you say?
I like it, yeah.
The Cargo Lux livery in and of itself is really nice, especially for a European airline because it isn't Euro white. They've got that nice gray. It looks beautiful.
Yeah, they're always good, and you always kind of think that Luxembourg is like one of the smallest countries on our planet, and yet they have one of the largest cargo airlines. But they are very centrally located in Europe, so it kind of makes sense for them to operate as a cargo air carrier.
Yep.
All right, and finally, some other. I'm not even going to say this is good news. The next news article I put in here, a Delta pilot couple retires on the same flight. this is Joe and Margaret. They both flew the A330 for Delta Airlines, and they shared their adventures through Instagram under the Flying Fagans tag. And this week they had their final flight for Delta. Joe has worked for Delta for 36 and a half years, or Margaret worked for 35 years. So together they've worked for Delta for 71 and a half years. And they flew their last trip together from New York to Milan. And the last flight was back from Milan. And kind of cool that, I did a little Instagram perusing because I have not seen them or heard of them before. But they did a lot of their trips together, which could go two ways. One, you're always flying and going to work with your wife, which could be good or bad for some people. But it is kind of fun that they always got their trips together, and they always got to go travel the world together and and travel to all these places together. And they go through and they get to I don't know. It just seems fun. I think it would be a good time. Apparently, you guys are speechless.
Yeah,
It's a great story.
Yeah.
It's probably the only good feeling news story we have today. What can we say?
Especially considering the next one.
A little teaser.
Well, why don't you go ahead with the next one?
Okay, I'm just waiting for it to pop open here. So basically, unfortunately, ExpressJet is going to be winding down their operations on the 30th of September. And they've said that it was because the United Airlines selected Commuter as their sole E145 operator, and they told ExpressJet to wind down flying for United Express, and they were the last customer, it sounds like. So there's that that hurt them, and then as well the termination of the CARES Act for you guys down in the States. As of September 30th, they are going to be furloughing and terminating all of their staff, with the exception of some people who are core people, to wind down the operation and try to find something else. And scheduled operations are going to just wind down till then. So it's pretty sad. Pretty sad for all them.
More unemployed dispatchers, more unemployed pilots.
Someone there has to stay there to turn off the lights and put out the final numbers on the financial bit, and then that'll be a wrap for ExpressJet. But yeah, I mean, God, this sucks. You can't put it any other way. We knew this was going to happen, and this is all just staring us into the face a lot quicker and even more.
Yeah. Yeah, and
we had, what was it? What was the one in St. Louis? Tri-State.
Tri-States.
Trans-States, yeah.
Trans-States. A couple months ago.
Trans-States, Compass. The Cranky Flyer the end of every year puts out a post about the airlines we've lost, and I have a feeling his airlines we lost post this year is going to be very large.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Yeah.
Alrighty, so with that happy note and fun news, let's go ahead and I'm going to push this button right here. Hopefully not blast your eardrums too badly. And yeah. Like I said, hopefully not too badly.
Yeah, is that music new? I don't know if I've heard that one.
That one's a little bit different. That one's almost 30 seconds long, so that's why I don't use it all that often. Alrighty. Alright, Joe, take us off. This is your idea.
Alright, so we're going to talk about ETOPS, or EROPS, or Extended Range Operations, or Entrance Turn or Passenger Swim, or any of the 500,000 other things that this has been called in the last 10 years. So basically, the principles of ETOPS, and I'm just going to call it ETOPS because it's easier for me, are there's three sort of things that you have to do. You have to certify the aircraft is capable of flying. Let me back up. So ETOPS in and of itself basically gives us the ability to fly further than 60 minutes away from an adequate airport. So for flying over oceans basically is the big one. Or sometimes, there's some parts of the world where you're doing this over land, like, in the outback of Australia or in the middle of nowhere up in Russia. They may do EROPS there, depending on their regs. So basically, this gives us the ability to file optimum routes out over oceans for the most part. So, back in the day, when airplanes wanted to fly over to Europe, for example, they'd have to fly all the way up the east coast to Goose Bay, cut across to southern Greenland, then keep going north over to Iceland, and then turn a hard right and head down into Europe to wherever it was they were going. That's pretty inefficient. It can add, hours of flying, extra fuel burn. So, back in the 80s, people thought, okay, we're getting these more modern twin jets, like the A300, A310, 767, and we want to be able to fly them like we fly the 747 and the DC-10, MD-11 out on efficient routes over the ocean. So in order to do that, you have to prove certain things are reliable. So you need to be able to prove that the aircraft systems are reliable. So that would be things like your engines, your APU, your electrical systems, and the big one that most people don't realize is your fire suppression system for the cargo pit. That's actually what gives you your ETOPS certification number, is how long you can keep a fire out in the cargo. And the other thing you have to prove is your operation control system is capable of doing ETOPS, and that your crew are trained for ETOPS, because there's a bunch of different contingencies and stuff. And specifically with regards to flight crew and to aircraft systems, when you're diverting to an ETOPS alternate, you're generally down at 10,000 feet, maybe one engine running, maybe two engines running. You could be landing at your diversion airport with a drop of fuel left in the tanks. Like your engines are almost flaming out as you're getting in there, and that's like the regulatory minimum to land. There's no reserve, there's no anything other than what's going to keep the pumps running and keep the engines on. So that's part of the special training, is for the crews to be used to that. So there's different types of ETOPS. So the standard ETOPS is ETOPS 60, and that's basically no ETOPS. So you have to stay within 60 minutes of an adequate airport. There's also ETOPS 75. That's a very specific op spec for places like the waters, New York Oceanic airspace. But generally, when you're talking about going over to Europe or the Hawaii or over the Pacific, you're going to have either ETOPS 120, 180, 240, and then depending on the aircraft, like you guys with the A350, you could have ETOPS, 330, I think is the maximum on that one. So more or less, you can basically fly between any 2 points on Earth once you get up at that point. And again, that basically tells you how many minutes away in still air you can be from an ETOPS alternate. So ETOPS alternate, so there's two different types of airports you need for ETOPS. One of them would be your adequate airport, so that's basically what you're basing your ETOPS segment off of. Because you imagine you're flying from New York to London, Heathrow. You're flying along, you're within 60 minutes of an adequate airport until you get out over the ocean, and generally you're going to have a point where you're entering ETOPS airspace. So that's the point where you're further than 60 minutes from an adequate airport. So that adequate airport definition basically means it's open and reporting weather. There's no weather limits. It could be 0-0. So you're flying along, you're hitting South Coast Newfoundland, and you're entering ETOPS based off of, say, St. John's. Then you're in ETOPS airspace all the way till you get across to Ireland, and once you cross the border of the 60-minute still air circle for your aircraft off of Shannon, that's when you would exit ETOPS. So in that whole period in the middle, you need to verify that you can get from your entry point to your exit point to an ETOPS alternate that meets certain weather minimums. And those weather minimums are generally higher, at least they are for us, than an alternate airport for just a regular domestic flight. So there's lower crosswind tolerances, there's higher ceilings and visibility requirements, especially when it comes down to things like probs and tempos. The rules are more stringent. And then, so basically, from your ETOPS entry point to your ETOPS exit point, if you can prove that you could go down to 10,000 feet and you've got the fuel between all of that time to get up to somewhere like Keflavik or down to the Azores, then that's all you need, as long as you're within 120 or 180 minutes of that airport. You could fly that whole way across with one ETOPS alternate. Now, say you can't. Say you have to do, Keflavik and Terceda or Lajes are no good. So now you need to go an ETOPS alternate on each of those coasts. Well, now at that point, you're going to have an equal time point. It's the point in time where if you turn around and you go back or you keep going forward, the time is equal. So that's going to be your equal time points. And some flights, especially over the Pacific, may have 2 or 3 equal time points as you progress, because you can't always turn around and go back to North America or back to Asia. Sometimes you may be going down to Hawaii or Midway or up to Russia or up to Alaska. So there can be multiple different equal time points. So that's kind of the rundown of ETOPS. There's lots of higher NOTAM and weather minimums, like I said. And then you've got the aircraft requirements. So before every flight goes ETOPS, there is a certain maintenance check that has to be done. It's called a pre-departure check. And in it, they're checking to make sure that you've got all the engine oils and fluids topped up properly. But most importantly is that the cargo compartments are sealed properly. Because like I said, the worst case scenario on an airplane, short of losing all of your engines, is a fire in the cargo hold. Because you can't go down there with a fire hose and put it out. So you're relying on your firefighting equipment down in the cargo pit in order to determine how long you can go till you get to land. So in the case of something like a narrow body, like a 737, they can, if they blow both of their bottles, they can last for 180 minutes, and that's where you get that ETOPS rating from. And then, like I said, then there's flight crew training, so they have to be trained on contingency procedures, on how to program ETPs and stuff like that. So they do a little course, and then as dispatchers, we do a course as well to learn how to do all this, and that's how it works for us. So, what do you guys think? I think I did a little lecture there.
No, it's fine. So, it's kind of amazing. So, the three of us all work for 3 separate airlines. 2 of us here, one of you, Joe, you're up north in Canada. I bet you Gregg and I, even though we fall under the same regulations, we do it differently. And I basically differently. I mean, we might have some different small things that are different. We have a big underlying understanding that greater than 60 minutes, you need to have some sort of alternates. There's regulatory things that we do, but there's also technique things that we do at at each airline. And first thing I want to say is regulatory wise, Joe said you might be landing at one of these ETOPS alternates with very little to no gas on board. And that's a little bit different than the way we do things here, at least the way we do things at Acme. But in the advisory circular 120-42 Bravo, which is the current advisory circular for the FAA when it comes to ETOPS planning, the ETOPS fuel calculation itself has to include drift down from your equal time point, or basically your point furthest away from an alternate, to the alternate. But it also includes, as you said, having to be at 10,000 feet because you might decompress. The worst thing that could happen out in the middle of the ocean at your equal time point is you have an uncontained engine failure that pierces the fuselage of the aircraft. Now you lose an engine and decompress at the same time, so you're going down to 10,000 feet. And you need to make sure you have enough fuel to get to where you can land at 10,000 feet. So that's all in there. We have 15 minutes of hold fuel that's baked into that calculation, which includes missed approach to around the ETOPS alt airport. We also carry a 9% fuel burn penalty for icing, just in case the aircraft picks up ice while you're at 10,000 feet going somewhere. So we have that in there. And then we have an extra 1.5% burn on top of it that is there just for wind airs, just in case some more gas. So the ETOPS fuel itself is always kind of, it's a hard number in there. And even when you're planning ETOPS flights, it's really hard to have your ETOPS fuel being your driving force for how much fuel you need for takeoff. And really, the only time I've really seen my ETOPS fuel when I was dispatching be the driving force of what we needed for takeoff was any flights going to Hawaii. Hawaii and anything going to and from the islands, you need 180 ETOPS because the land masses themselves are almost 6 hours apart. There's very small path where the two ETOPS alternates actually cross each other. So, I've gone and said it, I think before, but the simple easy flights LA to Honolulu as dispatchers, once you do them for a while, they're just over to Hawaii flights. But those are some of the most ETOPS critical flights that we have and that we plan, because they are almost constantly over the water. So we do have that. Greg, do you guys bake in anything different over there at Acme North?
No, actually, it's pretty much identical to what you had mentioned. You add in all that contingency for the wind and icing, and 15 minutes for the hold. So yeah, I mean, it's pretty consistent with what you have. And in fact, our flight planning system, when we flight plan a flight, it does all the calculations and it looks at all the critical points, and it'll do different type of scenarios, and it'll calculate the most restrictive scenario. And if your fuel that you're planning does not, if you don't meet those fuel guidelines, it'll actually add ETOPS fuel to make sure that you have the amount of fuel to get to your ETOPS airport.
Yeah. Like we do the same sort of thing. We don't do a flat rate for the icing. We actually have an icing chart, and we calculate how much it is. There's certain percentages like 5%, 10%, 15, 20, 30, 40, blah blah blah. And we actually calculate that. We don't just say it's a flat number. But yeah, we do have certain minimums baked in. But then again, when you actually think about how much fuel, say, a 737 uses or an A320, it's still not very much in the tanks when you're sitting there looking at a bare number, at least for us. So, and like you said, Hawaii is the number one, the biggest area of ETOPS for us as well. And in fact, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're going across the North Pacific, the area between North America and Hawaii is the furthest segment of ETOPS that you actually have, because once you're past Hawaii, you've got Midway, you've got Russia, you've got Guam, and you've got Alaska. So like that area there is actually the furthest that there's any two pieces of land across the whole North Pacific. So that's my understanding of it. And yeah, we do absolutely do the winds and stuff at 10,000 feet. Actually, what our system does, and I think we have the same system as you do, Greg. What our system does is it actually calculates what's the worst scenario, because for certain aircraft, being down at 10,000 feet with one engine is worse, or being down at 10,000 feet with both engines running burns more fuel. So I'm sure yours does as well, Mike. It'll calculate which is actually the critical fuel scenario for each aircraft type.
Yeah, it does. And sometimes, you're flight planning and you're looking and you're like, why did it add all this fuel? And you're scratching your head trying to figure it out. And you're like, oh, it added 5,000 pounds of fuel because it needs it for the ETOPS scenario. Like, that's what it is.
Yeah, the ETP build.
Yeah, and we have a thing, we have a basic general policy that we will pad our minimum ETOPS number by 1,000 pounds, just to throw an extra 1,000 pounds on top of that, because I believe the pilots have to make sure that they have that ETOPS number before they coast out. They need to go down to that section of the flight plan and make sure, yep, we actually have this amount of fuel on board, and we're safe to continue on into the oceanic and into ETOPS airspace.
Yeah, there's nothing suckier than you're just about to enter ETOPS and, I took an extra 20 minutes to get out of New York today, so I don't have my minimum fuel over ETP, so we're turning around. Yeah.
I have not had that happen, thank God.
Yeah,
I
think that'd be pretty rare, but yeah, it would suck. So, yeah, ETOPS is a pretty big one. Are you guys familiar with the terms of balanced ETOPS versus unbalanced ETOPS? Have you guys ever heard that before?
I am not.
Negative, negative, Ghost Rider. I'm sure we probably call it something else, or we just do it anyway.
Yeah, so basically, balanced ETOPS is. So imagine my hypothetical scenario. I'm going over the North Atlantic. I'm entering ETOPS off of St. John's. I'm exiting off of Shannon, and my ETP alternates are Torbay and Shannon. So you're entering and exiting, and your two ETOPS alternates are the same airports. So that's balanced. And what that means is your ETP, so you're going to have one ETP there, you got one alternate. So your ETP is your critical point. And that's where the critical fuel scenario is based off of. Now picture this. Shannon's no good, so I'm using St. John's and Keflavik as my ETP alternates, but I'm still exiting off of Shannon. So my critical fuel point is now at the ETOPS exit point, because from there I need to be able to go down to 10,000 feet, turn all the way around, go all the way up to Keflavik. So it describes where your critical point is, because most of the time for most ETOPS scenarios that I've ever come across, the critical point is actually the exit point, it's not the ETP. But if you're balanced, it's the ETP. Does that make sense to you guys?
No, that makes sense. We're not allowed to do that at Acme. Or, I mean, we're allowed to do it. I mean, it's legal, but we're not allowed to do that at Acme. We always have to have our ETOPS, our last ETOPS airport needs to be on the coast we're coasting in to. So if Shannon sucks, you're going to load on Prestwick. And if Prestwick sucks, you're going to load on Dublin. I mean, you're going to find something good in Europe. We found that a lot with the our flights coming back from Johannesburg. You know, legally you can just throw Bermuda on there and be done. But we always threw Charleston on at the end, just in case that exit point is further past Bermuda. Another technique we do at Acme, which I'm pretty sure we're the only airline that is this archaic and still does it, we always carry a CAF or a lodges in the middle. So we'll do a Canadian, a North America, we'll do either CAF or lodges, and then we'll do something in Europe. We always have 3 airports.
You're not the only one. So the goal of ETOPS always is to minimize your ETOPS diversion time. So just because your airplane can do ETOPS 180, if you can do it in ETOPS 120, that's better, because you're minimizing your time where you're flying out there with one engine with the cargo pit on fire and depressurized or whatever. So by all means, yes. So we do that too at Acme Canada if we can. But sometimes it actually doesn't, based on where the tracks are, it actually doesn't work out better. So sometimes if the tracks are way up north, you enter off of Goose Bay, you exit off of Keflavik, and you have nothing after Keflavik because you're outside of ETOPS at that point.
So it's similar at Acme North. We don't have to, by company policy, have an ETOPS at each end. So, I mean, theoretically, you could have just Goose as a ETOPS, right? And then use Kef and Shannon as a IA. So if the weather is really bad out in Europe, I mean, there's times I'll just have one ETOPS airport out, and then maybe you can use Kef and Goose or something or another, or a combination of Dublin and Kef if on the Canadian side it's bad. Or sometimes you just have one. Sometimes I just have Kef in the middle, and then hopefully it'll pair up together where it's ETOPS. Might be ETOPS 180, but depending on
Greg,
the weather, because there's times you can't
will
find
your
a good
flight
airport.
planning system allow you just to have Kef?
That's the default. Yeah, that's the default. If it can do it based on one ETOPS alternate, at least, because we use the same system. So if it can do it based on one, that's what it will do, because it minimizes the diversion.
Right. And there's
Ours can't do that.
If there's one airport, it always wants to use Sanderstrom too as one of our ETOPS airports, and we're not allowed to use that airport as a ETOPS alternate. So it limits, what we could use over Greenland. So either you have Kef or one of the other, Canadian side or Ireland side to see what's available.
Yeah, and sometimes the math doesn't work out. Like you could have an ETOP segment that's fairly short, and you could try to put an ETP in. So, like, say you're entering based off of Keflavik, you're exiting off of Goose Bay. You can try to get an ETOPS, but sometimes there's like no math where you'll actually get an equal time point because of the winds in that area. So sometimes your hands are tied as to what ETOPS alternates you can use if you can't do a single en route, which we can't at Acme Canada yet. So we have to like force the flight planning system to disregard that default setting that it has.
Yeah, we another thing, Greg, you mentioned Sonderstrom. We actually have that turned off as an adequate airport in our flight planning system. Our stuff from the Pacific Northwest over to Europe, a lot of the times that doesn't go into ETOPS airspace at all. It's always 60 minutes, and it's on a 60-minute route over the ocean. But the flight ops wants all of their transoceanic flights to show an ETOPS entry and an ETOPS exit point. So a lot of the times we literally have a fake one in there of Sonderstrom on either side, and you just have this 60-minute hole. And in order for it to work that way, like if we actually had a true 60-minute route, we'd actually have to plug in Prestwick, Kef, Sonderstrom, Goose Bay in, and they have little ETPs in between all three of them, and all four of them, and then there's your spruce route.
Yeah.
Yeah, we use Sonderstrom, so we always try to go for our west coast to Europe stuff. We always try to go 60 minutes non ETOPS. And we've actually been to Sonderstrom a couple of times with medicals, so it's interesting, but it's doable.
Oh, it's doable. And Greenland Air or Air Greenland, I forgot what their airline is. They fly 330s in the Sonderstrom, and we've made that point to flight ops many times that hey, there's regularly scheduled A330 service there, and they're like, yep, we won't go there. We'll only go there for on fire. James in the chat room says, and Greg, I don't know if you've have said this, done this before, but what's the ETOPS alternate when flying over the North Pole? Is flying over the pole considered ETOPS? Well, James, is absolutely considered ETOPS because there ain't nothing around there. Greg, do you do transpac at all or no?
No, I don't do anything with the pack.
You had a polar flight this week that you posted on your Facebook page about. What did you have for ETOPS alternates?
So I had a Tel Aviv San Fran flight. It went way north, up to 84 north, I think. And so the only, I used Longyear, which is up in Norway. And on the other side, I used, I think it was Frobisher Bay and Winnipeg with the three tops alters.
Yeah.
But if Longyear was bad, which it can be, I believe it's a single runway.
Yep.
Yeah, so you don't have many options really up that far north. You could try maybe using something, and you might even be too far east for Ireland, but
Thule maybe.
Yeah, maybe Thule.
Yeah.
But when you get that far up, your options are pretty darn limited.
For our polar flights, it's mainly Longyear or Fairbanks are kind of the two that kind of cover the poles that way. But other than that, man, a lot of it is if Longyear's not good, you're not going on that side of the pole, and it's Longyear's up there. It's
what about like Frobe or Iqaluit, and then something in Russia, like if you're going right over the top?
Oh yeah, totally Magadan and all of that. We those are the ones that we have constantly. Magadan. I'm trying to remember which ones are over there. We're flexing some dispatch brain muscles that I haven't used in a long time.
I've used Moscow as an ETOPS every now and then if I'm doing like out of Delhi, going up to to the Newark flights, and it's going way up north. I use Delhi or Moscow, and I forget what the other Russian airport we occasionally use, but every now and then, yeah, it's just the way it works out. A lot of times it's IA most of the way, adequate, until you get up to the coast out, and then you got it to start using your ETOPS alternates.
Our Russian ones that we use a lot is Anadyr, Magadan, Petropavlovsk, Yakutsk, and I think those are the 3 or 4 big ones that we really fill the gap in the Russian area of places that we use. Barrow, I don't think we have as an ETOPS alternate. I think our furthest north is Fairbanks or Eielson Air Force Base. Either one of those, but Yeah, long year is the big one that we have um for ETOPS going over the polls.
Have you ever had to put one in there?
We have not. We have not gone the long year yet, but we have gone to Midway and we've gone to Shemya before, and we have gone to Ascension Island.
How do you recover out of Midway? Like I went on Google Earth and there's like nothing there. It's like a
Uh,
sandbar.
you send another airplane there.
Yeah.
And you hope that when you landing in Midway, you don't take fuselage damage to the flaps with a couple of Goonie birds.
Yeah. Put two
Midway,
planes on the ground in Midway.
Midway is a bird sanctuary.
Yeah.
But James, also, this is also a great. This is also a great question, and my kids hate me when I do this. My kids won't play any sort of geography game with me at all. We have a couple of geography games for the kids for them to learn. So James asked, "Did you guys have this command of geography before you became dispatchers, or did you develop it as part of the job?" We developed it. I didn't know any. I knew some geography, but I didn't. Know a ton. But man, right now my kids won't play. We have a game that it's all about the different countries and what continent is which country on. The kids won't play that game with me at all because I just lap the board with them. I literally on the board, if we play, I have to go around twice to them going around once in order for me to win.
I was always pretty good at geography. Do you guys think in airport codes? Like if someone says Charlotte, North Carolina to you, do you think like Charlotte or do you think CLT?
CLT.
CLT.
Yeah. Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
The biggest problem I have is Dallas Love.
Dal.
DAL. Was that Dallas Love or is that Acme? Because our 3-letter is DAL. I mean, ACM.
Yeah.
So when I started my Atlantic training, I know domestically where all the states are, but outside of this country, I was pretty much geographically challenged. So when we started going through Atlantic stuff and first day of class, they gave us a map and said, okay, we want you to label whatever all the cities and countries are in Europe. And I'm like, okay, where do I start? I know where Ireland is, but that's about it. And it's actually a challenge for me to start looking at it and being like, okay, here's Germany, here's England, here's and every day now when I'm dispatching, I look at our ASD and I start looking at the countries. Okay, what country, where is he flying over today? And I start to make try to learn where everything is, because even to this day, I mean, I have a general idea obviously, but still try to place where everything is. So it's a skill you learn as you continue to do it, at least for me.
Yeah, it is, especially when you go to new places and new countries, new continents, or if you work in a new area, you definitely go through and try to find what you're doing that's new. So I still say, I was pretty good with geography to start with, but my geography skills really, really came to fruition the more and more I dispatched, the more places I sent airplanes to.
Yeah, like if I'm sending a plane somewhere new or somewhere I haven't thought about in a while, I'm just as likely to, if it's not for operational reasons, I'm just as likely to pull up Google Earth and like look at the satellite view of the airport than I am to pull up the JEP chart. Obviously, if it's regulatory, I'm pulling up the JEP chart because that's the official source. But like, if I just want to get a general sense of how the airport's laid out and where's the terminals and that and where what's the city like, then I'm pull up Google Earth all the time and just wander around. Sometimes you just drop the little guy down and you can take a look at stuff. I just do that for fun some nights if I'm bored.
Yeah, I'm not that. And, it's fun. I like geography. I like kind of knowing about different places. Circling back to the ETOPS a little bit, there's another thing on the maintenance side that I want to talk about, and that's dual system maintenance. We talked about the PDC a little bit, but there's also dual maintenance, and ETOPS dual maintenance, otherwise referred as identical maintenance or multiple maintenance, and sometimes simultaneous maintenance, basically is a special consideration where if you have more than one system that's being operated on, or serviced prior to an ETOPS flight, you might have to get an ETOPS verification flight before that airplane hits the ETOPS thing. So, for example, if they're replacing the hydraulic filters, I'm pretty sure the hydraulic system has a filter, but it probably doesn't. But anyway, if you're doing something on the left and the right hydraulic system at the same time, that's dual maintenance. You're now servicing a part of the aircraft that is on both sides. So that's what that would cause a ETOPS verification flight. So there's that there. The other thing, or like for example, if they're changing the right generator and they did something to the left generator, that's dual maintenance, and that in the United States that would cause force it to have an ETOPS verification flight, which kind of goes down into a verification program. And that's where the airline itself has to go through and verify that the aircraft is working properly, either on a flight before an ETOPS segment or 60 minutes prior to entering the ETOPS airspace. And we're allowed at Acme to do ETOPS verification flights on ETOPS legs. We just have to have a conversation between the dispatcher and the captain and maintenance prior to departure saying, all right, this is what they did on the airplane. This is what's been done. Here's what's going to, and this is what you need to be looking for on the aircraft. And then we have to get an ACARS message down from the crew 60 minutes after departure saying that, yep, everything checks out and is working normally.
That can be kind of risky if they're in the air and then they fail the ETOPS check and oops, now we can't go ETOPS.
Yes, it is. It is risky, but that's something that we're willing to roll the dice with.
Yeah, sometimes that's like the only option to route the plane back, right?
Yeah.
So, do you guys brief every ETOPS flight that you dispatch? Like at Acme Canada, we do.
It used to be a requirement where I used to work, but where I work now, it's not a written requirement that there needs to be a thing. So, yeah.
It is a requirement for us. Now, I'll be honest with you, a lot of pilots don't call for their briefing, but it is company policy that we should be briefed. We brief crews on ETOPS and the overall flight plan.
Do you guys do APU on demand for ETOPS narrow bodies at all? Do you even know what I'm talking about?
Not in my I mean, we don't fly narrow bodies over.
What do you mean by APU on demand?
So with us, so say we've got our narrow bodies going over to Hawaii. Planes like the 737 and the A320 weren't necessarily designed to do ETOPS when they were built. So in order to have your redundancy, there used to be, at least for us, that you would have to leave the APU running, so you always had a third source of electrical power and pneumatic power ready to go. So like on a 767, there's 5 different types of ways you can generate power, but on like the 737, there's 3, right? There's the engines, and then there's the APU. So APU on demand basically it's a heightened level of maintenance for the APUs. So APUs have to be removed after a certain number of hours. They have to be able to prove they can start them cold if they've been cold soaked. But basically, it means you don't have to run the APU the whole time you're in ETOPS. So it saves you fuel, saves you wear on your APUs, saves you some drag and some noise.
So when you put it that way, yes, we have an APU on demand program, and that's spelled out in the advisory circular for an APU in-flight start program, and that's the same thing every certain amount of days. And this here says a rolling 12-month APU in-flight start. But I think it's a little less at Acme, where it'll be an SPL that comes up on the flight plan that basically says that an APU cold start is required. And I think it's 2 hours after being up at altitude that they have to sit down there and actually turn on the APU, or on just prior to descent they have to turn on the APU to ensure that it starts, and then send a very specifically worded ACARS message down to maintenance control saying APU start or whatever the term is, so that automatically gets credited into the maintenance system.
Okay, yeah. So we do the same sort of thing, and like you said, there can be it's a message on the flight plan that says to do that. So yeah, for us, we've got a specific subfleet of our narrow bodies that does our ETOPS. So a lot of the times we'll do the cold soak on the way back from Europe or Hawaii on the narrow bodies because you don't want to do it going and then it's broken.
Yeah, that's that was always kind of like preferred, is you always do things on the way back, because like you said, if the APU doesn't work, now you have to apply an MEL and either run the. For us, it's mainly you have to run the APU the whole way from takeoff to the ETOPS exit point is what they're required for.
Yeah, yeah, it's the same for us. Yeah, it's the exact same. So yeah, I do remember James brought up this comment here. Let me highlight it. There was a couple of flights. I remember this a few years ago, where an aircraft was routed to Hawaii that wasn't actually ETOPS capable or ETOPS certified. Yeah. So the question would be: is that 100% on the dispatcher? Is that on the person who routes the tails? Is that on the captain? Or is that on all of them?
All of the above.
Everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I would figure too.
But really,
Yeah,
when it comes down to it, it comes down to the captain and the dispatcher because you both missed it.
Yeah, but so did the mechanic doing the PDSC.
Yeah, but true.
There's
But you're
a reason-
releasing the flight, and
Yep.
captain signed it.
Signing it. Yeah.
I don't know about you guys, but there's a reason why we have ETOPS written on the nose gear door. It's literally one last checkpoint for the mechanic doing the walk around, and even the lowly ramper saying there, "Hey, you guys are going to Hawaii. It doesn't say ETOPS on the nose gear," and you go, "Oh."
Yeah.
Our flight planning system will, not that you can always trust everything, but it'll, if you try running an ETOPS flight plan on a non-ETOPS airplane, it'll stop it. It'll fall out of calculation. It'll say not a ETOPS
Spit
airplane.
out an error. Yeah. Yeah, and so for us, we maintain our narrow body fleet and our wide bodies, obviously, for the most part to ETOPS standards. There's a couple of exceptions, and that's with some of our narrow bodies, they don't have an extra fire bottle or they don't have the radio, but the systems themselves are still good to go for ETOPS. So most of our tails can actually be routed ETOPS. We just have a sub fleet that are APU on demand. So if one of those guys aren't going, then we have to plan for the APU to be on. That's basically it.
Yeah, and
Right.
I remember that airplane that actually went to Hawaii. They had to cancel the flight when they got into Hawaii and ferry it back, I believe. But I don't even know how they ferried it without.
Because you're under a maintenance certificate.
I
You don't
guess
need.
you
You're
were
not.
using it as a.
Yeah, it's like a private jet at that point, right? They don't need ETOPS.
Yep, and then you're Part 91, and ETOPS isn't required for Part 91. So under Part 91, I could fly my. That's how ferry pilots work, by taking like 172s and Cirruses across and over to Europe. They're not flying 60 minutes. They're flying, the quickest route possible because they don't have the fuel to make it. But they're not flying ETOPS. They don't have a they're a single engine, so they're automatically a lost cause if they lose an engine. But yeah, those ferry pilots, anything Part 91, they don't legally need to have ETOPS like we do.
Yep.
Let me get to the show notes here. We hit everything on.
I did have a regulatory question though for you, Joe.
Sure.
So in Canada, so in the U.S., when you dispatch a flight using ETOPS, right? When we're doing the flight planning process, ETOPS has to be at or above alternate minimums at the time you flight plan it. When they get in the air and they enter ETOPS, they have to be at or above landing mins. Otherwise, if you do not have landing minimums, you have to come up with another plan, turn around, what have you. So I guess for you guys, when you're doing your flight planning, do they have to have landing minimums, or do you guys use actual minimums for your ETOPS selection?
So for when we're flight planning, it's the exact same. It's those weather minimums, the NOTAMs, blah blah blah. It's got to be above this and that, and the crosswind has to be less than 80% on a dry runway of the maximum demonstrated, blah blah blah. And again, once they get in the air, once they're in the air, it's up to the captain. For us, if they want to do now, obviously, good airmanship says if we're going through and St. John's goes down to 0-0 and 50 knot crosswinds as it's known to do, but Goose Bay is still good. I can just revalidate the flight plan with Goose Bay. But if there's absolutely nothing, I believe I'd have to quote the man. Remember, it's been 5 or 6 months since I've dispatched a flight plan at this point. But yeah, I believe that once you're in the air, it goes down to landing limits, and then once you're in ETOPS, it's not required. It's captain's discretion at that point. Because of course, once they're in the air, there's a lot of these airports that we have as our ETOPS alternates have Cat 2, Cat 3 ILSs that you can't plan on for your alternate limits. But once you're in the air, man, if St. John's has a Cat 3 on 2 runways and it's and it's 0-0, the captain may say, hey, you know what? It's still above the Cat 3 minimums. That approach is available, and I'm fine to continue. That's ultimately up to them if there's no other option, right?
Yeah, so I guess it's about the same for us then.
Yeah, because I mean, these ETOPS limits aren't like, yes, they're mandated nationally by the U.S., Canada, whatever, but they're ICAO guidelines, so generally they're going to be the same for everybody.
Greg, you said something that you said once they're in the air. I believe the regulation says once the flight has departed, you can go to landing minimums. And the way Acme reads the flight has departed is brake is released for departure. And anytime we push the gate is when we go down to landing minimums.
Really?
Yes. So the way that we have it in our ETOPS manual is once the flight pushes the gate, alternate minimums go away and you're at landing minimum.
That's a big difference because they say point of dispatch. Point of dispatch for us is wheels up.
And point of dispatch for us is taxi wheel going backwards.
Yeah, I mean, good airmanship would say if you're on the ground, you can go back to the gate and get fuel. It's not like you're turning around and landing somewhere, right? So,
yeah,
I probably wouldn't say, it's down to in the eighth of a mile. We got a Cat 3. Let's just keep going while he's still sitting 5 feet off the gate because they're just pushing, right?
Yeah, but finding an ETOPS alternate is a lot like finding a regular alternate. If the TAF is greater than 4 lines, you're going to look at another airport. I mean,
that's kind of hard sometimes with some of these.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you've been to Newfoundland in the winter?
Tempos. Yeah, the 24-hour tempos.
Oh yeah, like my favorite St. John's TAF is for a 24-hour period, 6 mile sky clear with a tempo of an eighth of a mile 0 0.
Yeah.
For 24 hours. It's like, thanks guys. Could you put in some effort?
That's when we walk over to our favorite Acme meteorologist that's right across the walkway from us and say, hey, can you look at the St. John's TAF for us? Because we're not buying the 24-hour tempo. And then they write us a new forecast.
Yeah, for me, I would just call up the weather forecaster in Montreal and say, so, St. John's, huh? And they'd be like, yeah, I'm looking at it.
All right, is there anything else you want to cover on ETOPS? I always say if flight planning ETOPS is pretty easy. It's just circles, and you need to make sure your line stays within the circles. I mean, a kindergartner can do it.
Yeah, the big one is the NOTAMs. Because, you think there's a lot of NOTAMs on a domestic flight. Oh my god. The NOTAMs on an international flight for ETOPS, you've got 12 more airports to read, and you've got 15 new centers to read, and it can be a disaster.
Well, and especially now with COVID and all that, you look at some of these ETOPS airports, and some of them say, they don't have passenger equipment available because of COVID. They don't have facilities available. I think the one down in Lodges right now says if there's no food available for an extended period of time. So you really got to be careful with what you're listing, because if you have to go there.
Yeah, and remember, the regs do say it needs to meet weather and it has to have services. So if they say our only air stair is broken, it could be sky clear, you still can't use it. Or ARF. ARF's another big one, because different countries report ARF differently. So we've discovered. Or the SNOTAMs, the international SNOTAM versus the FICON and the Canadian format.
Yeah, if you're
Training-
ARF level, we have to have a minimum of ARF level 4. So if that degrades below 4, you can't use it. And our
Yeah, and
flight planning system may not catch that. So you literally have to go through every NOTAM and make sure that they're meeting the requirements.
yeah, I mean, and the thing with ETOPS is, at least from my perspective, it's the one way that you could make your airline go bankrupt is by screwing up an ETOPS flight plan. Because if you're the guy who loses your airline's ETOPS certificate, that's that's a big deal. Would you wait to get hired by an airline? Oh, so at Acme Canada, you have to have been dispatching for Acme Canada for a year before they'll even consider giving you the ETOPS training. I don't know if that's the same for you guys.
No.
No, I think we have 6 months. You have to be a dispatcher for 6 months before you can pop over to the international side.
I think it's about the same with us. Yeah.
And
maybe.
that's eternal. That's not a regulation. That's just eternal.
Yeah.
I would say if you got someone that's going to offer you an ETOPS course for you to take some schooling on ETOPS and you're it doesn't cost more than, I'd say $200-$300, then you should take it.
Yeah. Doesn't hurt to have the background and the experience.
It looks good on a resume too, if you're applying for a worldwide carrier.
Yeah, like I was just talking to my mom about this today because it's a big thing with the military right now. It never hurts to go and do self-improvement. It never hurts to have more training. It never hurts to have more courses and more accreditation.
No, it doesn't. And this time and the flexibility that we're in now, if you're a bottom 50% of the seniority list type of person, you should be getting on and getting some. Go learn coding. Go get on Udemy and go learn how to create JavaScript or something else like that. So you can have some really good skills to fall back upon because everyone needs a coder.
Yeah.
That's what I need to be doing right now, learning code.
Yeah, Code Academy. It's pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's what I used to use. Yeah, but yes, absolutely. Any chance you can do to have self-improvement, because even when this is all over, when you're looking to be hired, it just makes you stand out. Makes them take notice of you. Gets you more likely to get an interview, more likely to get the job. Because if I could take the guy who's taken all this extra training on ETOPS, if I was hiring, over a person who's done the bare minimum, I probably would be looking at the guy who's done more, shown more interest.
All right. Do we have anything else we want to talk about the ETOPS?
Did we cover it all?
Well, no, there's no way we covered it. The advisory circle is like 48 pages long. So no, we didn't cover it all, but we definitely scratched the surface.
Yeah, and the ICAO doc is like 500 pages, and that's just for the NAT.
Yeah. So. All right, well, that's gonna wrap. That's gonna wrap that up, Joe. Thanks for the topic. I almost said poo-pooed Joe's idea about ETOPS, but you know what? I'm glad we did it because it was a good discussion, and that's what we want is all good discussions and all that. So I'm gonna go back to my show notes, which are hiding somewhere around here. I got nothing in the life. Joe, is your book dropped yet?
No, day before Halloween. October 30th.
October 30th for the book. Greg, we already talked. We know what you're doing. You're shopping for people's groceries and waiting for a warning coming from your employer. So
this week,
are you back in the big black tower? How'd that all shake out?
I am not. I am working at our suburban office, but our operations center right now is still functioning over there. There is rumors going around that our ops center may be moving out of the Willis Tower, but that's remained to be seen if that happens. But with all the stuff going on in the world right now, and the rioting and the protesting, it's probably having our ops center in the middle of downtown is probably not the best place. My opinion, of course, but so we'll see.
Yeah, they may be wanting to save money though, so maybe it's not the time to move either.
Well, they're building a brand new facility somewhere out in the suburbs that was supposed to be our backup center. This was all pre-COVID that they were working on this, and but this facility is pretty large, so who knows?
Nice.
Coming soon to a warehouse near you.
Yeah,
It's
that's all I've got going on right now. Just waiting. Next episode, I'll have all the details for you guys.
yes. Well, we wish you the best of luck, and may the furlough gods be in your favor.
Thank you.
And remember, Truckmasters is always hiring. Alrighty, so that's it. You can, if you want Greg and Joe to sound better or me to sound better, you can support us on Patreon. I made this as a joke, but actually Joe made this as a joke. I think we were live on the YouTube, but it won't be in the podcast. So if you want us not to hear Greg's nose breathing or Joe's wife doing dishes in the background, support us on Patreon. We definitely use the funds already. We don't make a lot of money on this show, and that's the way we like it. We just have it out there for super fans who want to go ahead and support us. And all that, and it pays for web hosting, it pays for Libsyn for us, Liberated Syndication, who hosts all of our media files and all of that, and puts it all on RSS feed and gets it down to your podcatchers. All that takes money. Shocking. So things like that. If you're wishing to support us, check us out on Patreon and go ahead and hit the subscribe button on there, and join the other 13 people that are supporting us on Patreon. And we thank all those that do, and we like the support from there. So other than that, I think we're going to wrap things up. And we're going to say that you can find show notes for this episode at flyinglife.com/2020/64. You can find the podcast on Twitter, Flying in Life, Facebook.com/Flying in Life. Instagram is Flying in Life, and it's pretty much covers our social media reach. And then, Greg, what about you? Where are you at online?
I'm everywhere. I'm on Twitter. What's my username? Yeah, it's DXDude1978. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Instagram. Or, yeah.
I just got these apps on my phone, and I don't really know what my logins are to them.
It all comes to my phone one way or the other, so you'll find me.
Joe?
Facebook.com/6catspress. 6 cats, like the 6 cats that you can see in the back. Press as in like a book press, so you can find out about my book. But other than that, got nothing. The Twitter doesn't make sense to me.
Oh, the Twitter's great. All right. Opening, closing music is from bensound.com. Bumper music is for purpleplanet.com. You can find the podcast on Stitcher Radio, TuneIn Radio. You can say, hey, Google, play the Flying in Life podcast. No, don't actually do it. No. Oh, well, it's actually going to do it. Yeah. Thanks, Google. So you can say that. There's a lot of things that you can do. So, yeah. Oh, shut up. I don't really want to hear myself there. Don't say that if you're around. Hey, that, and hey, the other one. Don't say them. That's very not nice thing to do. Other than that, that's going to close out our show. And I'm going to hit this button over here. And hopefully it won't be too blaring loud. So you can find us at all those places. Again, Joe, Greg, thanks for joining me. And thanks for listening, everybody. Alrighty, we're finished.
Woohoo!
Yay! Hey, it's an hour 30. Look at that.
Yay, 90 minutes of editing and I get to go through. Yay!
Yeah, I'll put it out on the ADF website like I did last. We got quite a number of people that like the last.
Yeah, that
Okay.
ADF site. There is a lot of people that commented on the post about the interview with Catherine. Greg, I should probably record this. I'm going to record this at the end because I want to throw this in here at some point.
I didn't actually read the comments. I didn't know there were any.
Well, there were on our Facebook page. Greg,
I know.
thanks for setting that up with Catherine and all that. I'm sorry that you couldn't be here with us, but man, that was a great show and it was a great episode. And there's a lot of really, really, I would say, big time infamous dispatchers that listened to that, and it was really nice to see their comments on our show, and it kind of like, oh wow, I can't believe that. And now there's like, I don't know, I think I had about 5 or 6 different coworkers that have liked the podcast now. So
good.
no, that's not good. I mean, it's great. It's great, but it's kind of funny that the podcast that was under the radar a little bit isn't so much so.
I get some flack at work about it too. So
Of course you do, but it's you. We're allowed to give you flack.
yeah,
That's your role.
yeah. You go, Dubin's got a podcast.
Well, I tell people at work, I'm like, yeah, I'm really an introvert, and they're like, bull crap, and I'm like, I am. I don't like people, and they're like, you have a podcast. I'm like, well, that's a little bit different.
You need to talk to yourself, right?
Yeah, I talk to myself. I mean, I used to for what 40 some episodes. I talk to myself, so it's all good. Alrighty, I'm gonna.
Captain Jeff's got you beat though. He had how many episodes by himself?
About almost 90, almost 100
Yeah.
by himself.
Yeah.
Plus
imagine.
over 100 by himself.
Yeah.
Stopping that there. I'll find a way to put that in a little bit. So, alrighty, guys. Thanks everyone who watched in the chat room. Glenn and James and this Flying in Life podcast dude. Oh, that's us. And saw Liz in here. So thanks everyone for watching and all of that. I'm gonna go say goodnight to the kiddos. I'll get this a bow on this and out within the next 6 days because I want this out by zero Z on the 1st. So that's to get it on this month's Libsyn ballot or allocation of space. But other than that, you guys got anything?
No.
2 weeks. 2 weeks for the next one.
We'll talk about that in a second. All right, so I'm gonna hit the end broadcast button. Thanks for everybody.
Bye.